Thanks very much for the chance to be here today. He's going to nick off on my speech. This is going to be pretty tough, isn't it?
I just tested, Terry.
Yeah, okay. Going well so far. Can I start by acknowledging the traditional owners? And when I drove into town today, slightly late, I apologise for that. You look at the history of Northam and you see the old buildings, the heritage, the people that have come here and sort of developed this area. But quite frankly, it pales into insignificance to the 30 or 40,000 years of Indigenous heritage. Nothing brings it in closer focus than the sounds of the didgeridoo. And thank you, Trevor, for your welcome to country. And also, I want to highlight our collective responsibility to ensure the first Australians share in the prosperity of Western Australia. My ministerial colleagues, Honourable Mia Davies, here somewhere, Minister for Water and Forestry, and also have some parliamentary colleagues, I think, in Martin Aldridge and Shane Love. Also to Sue Middleton as the Chair of the Regional Development Trust, Tim Shackleton, of course, as the Chair of the Wheatbelt Development Commission. There's a number of Directors General here and special guests. Just listening to Tim talk about some of the speakers, he mentioned the second one being very smart. He didn't talk about the first one being very smart, which worries me a little. But what it does highlight to me is that we have CEDA now, and I want to acknowledge CEDA for having the State of the Region series, which is a step of faith for them in coming out into regional Western Australia and having a look at what's happening in the regions, and I guess bringing some pretty high-profile people to talk and interact and engage on regional Western Australia. And I think that's the great outcome here, that not only are we thinking about profiling the areas that we're passionate about, but it's also bringing people to the table to have those discussions, sometimes hard discussions, as to about how we can move that forward. So I think that what CEDA has done now is putting a greater profile on regional development and regional Western Australia, and I think the notion of us being in a position to take some pressure off the growth and development and the opportunities in Perth is a good thing and something that we need to fully embrace. So the state of the regions, in my view, is strong. In terms of royalties to regions, although regional development is not just royalties to regions, and Paul White, as the Acting Director General, talked about royalties to regions as being obviously a strong focus, I think what that initiative has done is brought a bit of buzz to regional Western Australia. Having a resource to be able to support and direct to deploy to make outcomes, deploy to unlock the potential, is something actually has brought a buzz to regional Western Australia. And if we look at some of the things in this region in terms of what royalties to regions has done, in the Wheatbelt it's delivered more than $420 million, with a further $170 million allocated for this financial year. Significant resource. It's provided things like a vastly improved health and aged care facilities, better mobile communications. Now, mobile communications is a federal commitment, a federal responsibility, and yet it's one of those things that truly can unlock the potential of regional Western Australia. We have delivered here more efficient use and reuse of our pressure water resources, upgrades of regional airports, new boating facilities. It's a Wheatbelt, but we still have some coast. New extension of the state barrier fence, looking at biosecurity challenges, research into carbon farming, environmental projects like living lakes and the Avon Valley restoration, and of course some $130 million in the country local government fund supporting some of those more civil developments, civic developments, which have enhanced some of our regional communities, and also things like fuel card, patient-assisted transport service, and John's ambulance, and things like the RFDS. So it has delivered a significant amount of resource and significant change to these areas. And perhaps just as importantly, or more importantly, than that investment and what R4R has done, it's also ensured that people in regional Western Australia are seen as valued, and they shouldn't accept second best. And I think that's a really important point. Often in the past we've talked about some sort of compromise in service, or some sort of compromise in how we should be laying out our vision for how we should develop. We shouldn't accept second best. We should have the discussions to grow and develop in regional Western Australia, to have the infrastructure and the services that we have in other parts of the state, notably our cities. If we look at some of the, and I guess the notion of having the prospect now of laying out a vision and being able to deliver on that vision is really important, and that's what royalties to regions has brought to the table. Now, I remember engaging for a number of years, as we all have as members of Parliament, with our local governments and what those local governments are trying to achieve. And often they're fighting over scraps of resource between each other as to what the priorities and so on are. Having now seen what's been rolled out in the last 5 or 6 years and having a significant amount of resource on the table has been able to mature that discussion up to a much higher and much more regional level, to a level of significance where we can actually look at those things that develop and grow communities to be long-term sustainable. And I'll talk about some of that, our shift in thinking over time as we look at rolling out the blueprints as giving some direction to that, and the resources of royalties regions going forward. So some of the big investments are things like the Southern Inland Health Initiative, $560 million extra into the southern part of regional Western Australia to support health services. So critical to ensuring people stay and want to live in these regions because they have access to key services that otherwise they might make a decision to move or shift to somewhere else. We've also announced in this town recently $46 million upgrade to the Northam Hospital through the Royalties to Regions program. Also upgrades to both Narrogin and Merredin Hospital as significant centres supporting our health services. A further $43.3 million allocated towards fit-for-purpose healthcare, 2 trial sites being in Pingelly and Cunderton, to look at another way of delivering health services into those areas. And what comes with an investment like that is also capacity to look at innovation when we deliver these services. How can we do it differently to make sure we actually treat the challenge that's there and not look at it from a 1950s or 60s or 70s perspective? And I guess that new model, or trying to change that thinking, means we need to have good leadership in our community to be able to do it. So some of the things coming through what is seen like a big investment into health is also delivering a shift or transition of how we deliver those services. And I think that's a really important point as we embrace new investments and how those investments should be rolled out. There's a very good example here of one of the enhancements that we've done through that program in telehealth and emergency telehealth support. And some of you would know the story of Peter Ralston in this region, who lives in Tamman. He was on a farm, overdid it a bit one day and he had a heart attack. And he was taken to the Cunderton Hospital because Cunderton Hospital had an emergency telehealth service. And he was able to be put in contact, direct contact, with Dr. Bob Graydon in Perth, who was able to give the advice that's needed at a critical point in time to the nurses in that hospital, which kept him alive. Now that is the sharp point of considering the things that we need to do. In this case, it's a health example of bringing innovation to the table to deliver services and get quality service into areas that otherwise wouldn't have those services. The decision was made to take him to Cunderton on the basis of that service being there. Really significant. If you haven't seen the telehealth services, it's fantastic. Not a terribly big investment compared to that sort of message as about how it can change the lives of people. The one thing about royalties to regions is just about every day of the week it's going to need to be defended. We know there's challenges in our budget, how we make the budget work, and part of my responsibility as leader of the Nationals in this case, and also Regional Development Minister responsible for royalties to regions, is to ensure we maintain full budget integrity, but also to maintain the integrity of a program here that's making such a big difference over the last number of years. And the challenges come from funny areas. There's obviously direct challenges from things like the EIRA report, the Economic Regulator, saying you should repeal the Royalties to Regions Bill. Shut it down. We don't think it's an efficient way of spending money, an effective way of spending money. It was regional Western Australia that stood up and defended that, and I'd like to think it was regional Western Australia that allowed, when the final draft came out, to say that no, we're shifting our position, we're happy for royalties to regions to be there. But I'll give you another example which came from a little bit from left field, and I use this example in Bunbury because I think it highlights a culture that can sometimes sit under the surface and we don't actually see. The CEO of the Council of the Ageing recently, when the federal government pulled some resources for seniors concessions, 25 million, the state government had to make some decisions about what services it was going to drop because we don't want to backfill decisions that the federal government makes. And the CEO, and in that debate, that ensuing debate about what seniors concessions were out there and what was good and what was bad, the CEO of the Council of the Ageing said, I think that the country age pensioner fuel card is inequitable, it's inefficient, and it's poorly targeted. Now, I don't mind someone having a critique of the country age pensioner fuel card. It's a $550 fuel card for pensioners that live in the country to help with transport services in response to the fact that if you lived in the city, you would get free public transport. Now, if he put alongside that commentary in saying that the fuel card is inequitable and it's inefficient and it's poorly targeted, that he said, I also don't support free public transport in the city, I would have accepted his argument. So why didn't he say that? Why didn't he say we're going to shut down free public transport in the city because that's a concession that the public purse can ill afford? So I think that shows people need to walk in the shoes of the people that live in regional Western Australia and understand the issues that they face, and something as simplistic as transport is really, really important to them, and something like the fuel card is a strategy for addressing that transport challenge. And it may be that people can run those arguments, but let's look at the whole lot and let's look at the comparison between city and bush in terms of what those services are. And I think that it's really important that when there is commentary around things like royalties to regions, and yes, I think over time we can get better at how we do that, and part of my talk today is about where we're moving with R4R, that it is a program that's making significant difference. It does need to be defended, and it's important that we accept the critiques that are out there, valued criticism, to make sure we can do a better job of that in the future. So as Paul said in his address, the Royalties to Regions program up until I think February this year has approved $4.2 billion over 3,500 projects. In the next 4 years of budget, it's $1 billion per year of expense limit, which is an average of about $200 million per year, better off than the last 4 years. It's a significant resource. It's something like 3.4% of the state budget, but increasingly we're wanting to be more strategic about how that gets deployed so that we can make some long-term differences. And I want to work through a couple of those programs. In this last budget, we announced $600 million into a Growing Our South initiative, which is covering off or putting the last pieces of the jigsaw into revitalisation plans that have occurred through other Regional Development Commission regions. We've had the Pilbara cities. This is probably the shining light of a regional development initiative. We've had the Gascoyne revitalisation. We've had the Esperance Goldfield revitalisation. Well, there's 4 development commissions, and they being the Wheatbelt, Great Southern, Southwest and Peel, that now have $600 million over 5 years in order to put extra resource into revitalising those development commission areas, and there's a governance process which we're putting in place to support that. And of course that is significant to the Wheatbelt because now you have your day in the sun, and those people that were bashing my ear, and I'm sure bashing Mia's ear and Shane's ear, it's all going north. What about the south? And I think the south has now got a chance to have access to a competitive resource to make a significant difference. I talked about being more strategic. If I can use this as a way of describing it, I think historically, and I think we've even been guilty of this, historically we've looked at regional development as the disadvantage. What is the disadvantage? You measure it and you fund it, you fill the gap. You simply approach it from we're missing out and what's the gap you need to fill. We're trying to shift from a focus on the disadvantage, which is a very level one way of thinking about it, to what are the opportunities? What are the things that we can do that can unlock the potential? What are the things that we can invest in and support, hopefully in partnership with industry, in partnership with the private sector, to actually unlock the potential in regional Western Australia? And you will hear today, obviously a sharp focus on the Wheatbelt, but you will hear what a lot of those potentials are. And making the investments necessary to unlock that potential is really important. So when I talk about strategic, we're talking about a shift. Yes, it's important that we maintain services and deliver on some of those things. And I think investment into Main Street projects and things like that help to give a level of amenity in these areas, which is commensurate with some of the city areas. And we've made a number of significant investments in that area. But as time goes on, we need to be more strategic. We need to look at what the opportunities are, identify that and try and unlock that potential. And that's going to take, in some cases, some leadership. I don't think that's easy. And I want to compliment the Wheatbelt Development Commission, and particularly Wendy Newman under her leadership, in terms of identifying the challenges, the opportunities, and trying to drive what they see as a plan for this area. I had a look at. I was worried about all these blueprints coming in. And I was worried about which do I think would be the challenging ones, and I identified in my own head that the Wheatbelt would be challenging. But to their credit, they've laid out a plan, they've laid out a vision, which I'll talk about in a minute as well, which takes on some of those challenges and says, yes, we understand there's probably going to be some winners and losers through this. So I think sitting behind it is also the important bit of having some good, strong leadership, supported by government, supported by ministers, that will ensure that those communities finish up thriving going into the future. So we talk about the blueprints, and Tim talked about the blueprints a second ago for this area. We have blueprints being developed up in various stages. The Wheatbelt one's been out for comment. The focus on the blueprints is to identify those things that can drive the economy, those things it's an economic and social development plan. It's not designed to be a shopping list. There will be investment decisions that fall out of that, but it's a genuine strategy to identify those things that are important for this area that we think we can drive and unlock potential and see where the future sits, have a bit of a vision for that, and then make investments to support that. Notionally, it's about regional growth and development aspirations. It's about transformative strategies, bringing some innovation to the table. It's about priority implementation of actions, and it's about investment opportunities that we can make. And I think just as importantly, it's also coming from grassroots up. It's not Terry Redman coming in as Minister saying, this is what I think is important for you. It's coming from within. And I think that ownership's really important. I took a question, we've just had regional cabinet down in Manjimup in my own electorate, and one of the questions I took was around the food council down there, and one of the outlying towns said to me, he says, Terry, why aren't we in that? You know, why we want you to push the fact to get, you know, Bridgetown involved in the Southern Forest Food Council. And my response was, as much as I'd like that to happen, is the minute I intervene, the minute I go in and say, I think this is what it should look like, locals lose ownership to it. So we've got to find that balance between driving, taking some leadership and driving some resource to support outcomes, but also having local ownership because it's really important to them. And if we don't do that, I think that's a pathway to failure as well. So the Wheatbelt Blueprint is out for public comment. There's been quite a bit of feedback. That feedback will be integrated into the final plan, the final draft. And again, I compliment Tim and Wendy Newman, Tim Shackleton and Wendy Newman, on their leadership in trying to get something that actually makes a difference in this part of the world. So what does the new picture for the Wheatbelt look like? I've always been a bit critical, not outwardly because you get caned from the papers, but I've always been a little bit critical of how regional West Australia, and I guess particularly the southwest, and I guess the Wheatbelt's one of those areas, how it gets reported, how people in the cities visualise it. And it's often after droughts where you see dead sheep in front of empty dams and that sort of perception of what it looks like. And I think there's a bit of a skewed view of what regional Western Australia looks like. And I think when you start to dig down and look at what's really going on, there's huge opportunity, there's huge potential, and we can lay out what those areas might look like. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to paint a bit of a whole picture version of the Wheatbelt. So let's have a look at it. The Wheatbelt's a region of growth. 6.6% average annual growth rate, and Tim mentioned that over the last 10 years, 6.6%, that's bigger than the state's growth rate. The Wheatbelt is diverse in economic and lifestyle opportunities. The Wheatbelt's about people committed to and passionate about their communities and investing heavily in their communities. The Wheatbelt's a region about innovative yet practical solutions. So far from decline, the future of the Wheatbelt is one of huge economic and social potential. A future where 180,000 people in the year 2050 choose the Wheatbelt as their home because the jobs are many and varied, the schools are high quality, healthcare and accessible, and the people are entrepreneurial, highly skilled and passionate about their community. Describes beautifully the Wheatbelt areas. Interestingly, we talk about agriculture as being one of the backbone industries, and certainly it is. But the interesting outcome when you assess the Wheatbelt is actually mining is a bigger industry. Mining is one of the bigger drivers. So mining and agriculture are two very, very significant activities in the Wheatbelt area, and no doubt will play a significant role in terms of its economic future and its economic development going forward. But beyond those two, we've got very diverse and exciting prospects in transport, logistics, niche manufacturing, alternative energy, food processing, aged care, tourism and retail. Truly diverse. The community, interestingly, it probably won't surprise you either here. The residents feel safer, more connected and have a greater sense of community than any other region in Western Australia. It definitely won't surprise you, this one, but it's got the highest volunteering rates of anywhere in Australia. We couldn't do without volunteers, and the Wheatbelt certainly couldn't do without volunteers, whether it be bushfire brigades, ambulance services. You go into some of these communities and you've got the same person on about 4 or 5 different volunteer groups. In the past, out of necessity, but those communities have driven that, and certainly it's a credit to the, the people and, I guess, the sense of community in those areas. And I think the other important bit here is about the importance, and I come back to my point when I talked about the importance of leadership in when we generate direction. The importance of having to team up. If you've got communities in many cases that are isolated, they have different demographics, different challenges with those demographics. The importance of teaming up and presenting to government a very clear direction as to about how you want to see that going forward is absolutely critical. You can't be, and we can't have all services in all communities. And this is what I talked about when I talked about having winners and losers. Unfortunately, that's going to be one of the outcomes, but being able to embrace that as a challenge and getting buy-in and showing good leadership to get to the outcomes is going to be critical to seeing a region like the Wheatbelt thrive and go forward. Aged care has been one of these significant backbone opportunities. I've got the little, I haven't seen one of those before, I've got the overtime sign at the back there. It's pretty clear you can see the social dividend of aged care, being able to support the elderly in our community, but what's not often seen is the economic dividend that comes from that. For every person in aged care, you've got 1.6 jobs of employment, and that's seen as one of the backbone opportunities here. So you're taking aged care from being a challenge to an opportunity. And also what we're seeing is the demographic shift of people 65 and over is actually growing faster in regional Western Australia. That's actually growing in the city. One of the other, I want to talk a bit about our investments in agriculture. The state government's put a significant profile on agriculture. The Seizing the Opportunity $300 million program is rolling out now. We've launched the Water for Food with Mia Davies up in the Kimberley recently. Another number of tranches is coming through. $120 million towards research and development in the grain sector was launched at Darren Field Day recently. But I want to talk a bit about the narrative. These aren't just little grabs of investment. The narrative here is about how we can set Western Australia up to ensure that it's in a position to capitalise on the opportunities in Asia. And there's some very, very good contemporary reporting which talks about what we need to do that. Part of it's about the asset, the resource, the water and land asset. Part of it's about biosecurity. Part of it's about research and development. Part of it's about trade and investment and capitalising on efficient pathways to market and getting investment to support that. And part of it's about skills development. So when you hear a seizing the opportunity investment decision that government's made, there's a broad goal here, and that's to line up the ducks to capitalise on what's going on now. We're seeing Twiggy Forest invest in Harvey Beef. We're seeing Parmalat buy out Harvey Fresh. We're seeing investment by the Chinese in the Ordees Kimberley. We're seeing investment decisions right across Western Australia into the agriculture sector. There's no shortage of investment interest, so we need to set ourselves up for that. The Wheatbelt is in a prime location to capitalise on it. Government's making its investments, but it's also going to need industry and the private sector to step up to be able to support that. I heard this morning from one of my advisors that a recently reported Rabobank confidence in the ag sector was as high as it's been in Western Australia. And so I think higher than all other states. So certainly there's a high level of confidence in the ag sector. When you see this investment interest that we're seeing, there's no doubt that we will see that as an opportunity. So I think we haven't got limitations to capital access, to investment. We haven't got limitations to the market or demand. What we miss out on a bit is scale and being competitive in being able to deliver to those markets. An announcement we did this morning, I guess a local one here, strongly supported and pushed by Mia Davies and Shane Love as local members with their upper house members' support. But Avonlink, as you know, was looking at being shut down, and I think had been shut down as a part of government efficiency. We've announced today $6.6 or $6.575 million of Royalties to Regions Fund to support a 3-year trial of Avonlink service on an enhanced service, another 2 services per day for 4 days a week, an extra service on the weekends, including about 10 extra services for key functions in the Avon Valley here over the course of the year, in the hopes that we can put in a scheduling, marketing and a timetable that picks the sweet spot for where the use of that service is, and hopefully get that to a point where it can have significantly less government subsidy that it needs now. Largely a commuter service now. but picking up on people trying to link this part of the world, the Avon Valley here, back to the eastern part of Perth as a way of taking some of that weight off. So we're very pleased that that's announcement's come today. There's a whole heap of things I could talk about. Industry, mining, manufacturing, tourism, energy, a whole range of things. But I think what you're going to see for the rest of today is a good snapshot of how people view this part of the world, the importance of the Wheatbelt to the state. We've supported it with significant resource. You're helping us drive the direction of that resource through the blueprint process. And I'm hoping that the blueprint charts a course towards what I think will be a rich, exciting and inspiring future for the Wheatbelt in Western Australia. Thank you very much.